It was supposed to be such an uneventful day, but overhead the clouds churned and plotted. Rebecca Madison saw and she heard the roaring wind against her car, but she didn't care. It was warm inside, so what did the fierce cold outside have to do with her? It didn't matter. There were only two things that mattered to Rebecca at that moment. The first was the clock and the numbers on it. 7:46 it read. It was 7:46 on a Monday morning, and she needed to be at her desk at SMC, a pneumatics manufacturer, by 8. Her drive had another 15 minutes to go at least, and that was hoping against all odds that she could hit every green light. She knew that wouldn't happen, but she didn't worry about it just yet. She was still far in the country. The road before and behind her was empty. She pushed the speedometer from 65 to 70 miles per hour. She worked in relations, not glamorous, but it was all she had, and she was damn good at it. Lately, however, she'd been pushing her luck. She'd made arriving late a bad habit. Well, it's easy when it's never noticed. It wasn't consistent, not every day, but at least twice a week she slipped under the bell. The game had changed when her supervisor noticed, and since their little talk last week, everything got more complicated. Everything was too complicated as of late. That was thanks majorly to her other concern back home, her mother. Rebecca had never married. She lived alone for many years, and that was perfect. She thought it would be no hassle at all when she asked her mother to move in with her. It had been right after her father died, and she couldn't bear the thought of her mother alone. No home beside hers will do. As the years went by, she started to wonder if it had been worth it. Her mother, nearing an impressive 95 years of age come next April, was still a very smart woman. Rebecca saw that every morning. The only issue was that her mother could no longer retain that spark. Her mother had fallen prey to sundowner syndrome. Every morning, her mother was still the woman she remembered, sans the fault in her face. But come night, the very sight of her was more than disheartening. It was nearly unbearable. Rebecca didn't want to use the word, but it was an annoyance. That's why Rebecca always ran so late. She enjoyed seeing her mother in the morning, dreading the state she'd come home to find her in. And there was so much to manage. She had to lock the doors and hide keys so she wouldn't wander outside. There were so many medications. She had to help her to the bathroom and get her dressed. She promised her she'd never put her in a home, and now that promise was more solidified than ever. Rebecca knew that she would never see her mum in the mornings again if she was to do that. It was hard, but Rebecca and her mother did their best. She was determined to do so for as long as they had left. The thought came to her that morning as it did every morning. She should call her mother, talk to her just for a little bit longer before the day ruined her. That's all she'd need. Her mother didn't need to be physically strong to help lift the weight of depression from her shoulders. But as she reached for her purse, she realized that her phone had never left the bedside that morning. It had been neglected in her panic to get out the door. It made her eyes tear up with frustration rather than sadness. All she could do was sit in the white noise of the radio and watch the endless fields of dead corn roll by. She pushed up the speedometer again, up to 75, and the radio came to the forefront of her mind. Her ear clung to it out of the blue, but honestly, she didn't hear it. Still unsure of the scope of the event, all that's known at this time is that the Chinese government has declared a state of national emergency. At the moment, China has released no official details of the events that have transpired over the last 24 hours, and they've ignored all of the UN's offers to assist them. No sources have yet been able to confirm any further details as communication with the troubled nation has grown difficult, with many intelligence satellites showing major power outages within the nation's borders. An abundance of rumours, however, have started circulating from around that stretch of incredibly believable to utterly improbable. While the intelligence community has flat out denied a majority of these rumours, it's hard not to notice that a lot of them sound incredibly similar to ones that started circulating just last week about Somalia, where... Rebecca turned the radio from AM to FM. She was in no mood for news that morning. She preferred music. She allowed herself to get lost in it. The country song fit her surroundings, like a puzzle piece. A silo grew closer on her right-hand side, a picturesque farmhouse nestled right beside it. On the left she spotted an older blue Ford pickup coming towards her carrying a horse trailer. The sights of Ohio. She felt much younger, and that's all she wanted. The moment was so perfect that it perfectly distracted her from the red, raccoon-sized mass that landed on the road ahead of her. With a bang, her tyre was shredded. Only once before had Rebecca felt a tyre blow, and she'd been 7 at the time, with her father at the wheel. She remembered how calmly he'd handled it. He gritted his teeth and willed the truck to stay on the road. He'd tensed up, but he handled it expertly. That's the only way he could do things. She'd wished he'd passed that on to her. She screamed, and instinctively she jerked the wheel to the right. The car skidded and hit gravel. She overcorrected again, just barely managing to save her car from sliding into the ditch that hugged the side of the road. The car skidded into the oncoming lane, spinning to face the way she'd just come from as she slammed on the brakes. She gritted her teeth, expecting more, but mercifully, her car came to a stop without further incident. Everything came to a stop, except for her heart. It was pounding faster than it had in nearly 5 years. She remembered the truck, but about 10 seconds too late had it still been an issue. The man driving the truck had managed to stop about 2 car lengths away. He was already on foot, and he was almost to her door. The knock of his knuckle on the glass brought her back to reality. "Hey, miss," he asked, concerned. "You alright?" She eyed the older man. He was thin as a twig, with a bushy moustache and a sun-dried face. His eyes squinted down at her as she nodded her head in affirmation. He nodded his back. "My phone's in the truck. Hold tight. I'll be right back." With that, he turned and hustled back to his truck's cab. As he searched, she relieved herself of her seatbelt. She felt like she'd been punched in the chest by a gorilla. Her head was heavy. She realized she was dizzy and she took the first step out of the car. It was like she was walking on jelly. Gripping the door with white knuckles, she fought against the fierce wind. It threatened to at least knock her on her ass, if not carry away altogether. She closed her eyes, held on, and took several deep breaths. It would have helped calm her down a great deal, had the old farmer not accidentally startled her when he returned. He must have seen it in her eyes, because he quickly apologized. "Sorry, you sure you're okay?" "Yes," she said, trying to convince herself more than him. "I'm fine. Are you okay? I'm so sorry. Did I spook your horses?" "I stopped in plenty of time, miss. It's an empty trailer. Horses are about 10 miles down the road. It's okay. Your tire blow out?" She wasn't too sure. Everything was still spinning. "I think so. Shit, I hope not. I don't have a spare." "It's okay, miss," the farmer chuckled as he put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Everything's going to be just fine. Let's go check out the damage." He was very kind to her. The farmer cautiously and sportively guided her by the arm, making sure to correct her every sway. They took their time as they moved around the front of the car. Sure enough, when they reached the right front wheel, there's almost nothing left on the rim. The rubber had been shredded. It looked like she'd driven over a field of razor wire. "Phew," said the farmer. "Yup, your tire's seen some better days, I reckon." Shaking her head in disbelief, Rebecca felt like vomiting. The wind continued to assault her face with a frigid, ungodly cold. The farmer didn't seem to mind it as much. His focus was back down on the road, towards the rest of her tire. We should go clear that off the road, he said. She begrudgingly went along. It had nothing to do with him. She just wanted to be inside the warm embrace of a car's heater again. The damn marshmallow of a coat she was wearing didn't do a thing to help. She took out the fuzzy black gloves she kept in her pocket and slipped them over her hands. The warmth didn't fast enough for comfort. Comfort was knowing that now she had an excuse for being late. That should have taken a load off, but she'd realised that she'd have to prove it, a situation made difficult by the lack of her phone. Hey, thanks for your help, mister. She intentionally trailed off, hoping he'd fill in the blank. Sanders, he replied. Phil Sanders. It's absolutely no problem, miss. Madison. Rebecca Madison, she said, shivering. Does your phone have a camera on it by chance? He eyed her and smirked. He held up a black smartphone. Just 'cause I'm old doesn't mean that I don't... Sorry, she interjected, chuckling with him. I didn't mean anything by it. Just giving you a hard time, miss. What about the camera? Well, I left my phone at home. Another wind struck her and shook her. I was wondering if you could help me out, take some pictures, you know, for the boss mainly. I hear ya. I think we'll be able to come to an arrangement. They were almost at the remains of her tyre. The tattered remains sat about 50 yards away from where her grey Civic had stopped. The rubber had peeled right off her rim. The treads still faced down, and the torn strands of rubber curled upwards like a flower petal. Hey, looks like it stuck the landing, Phil said, eyeing the rubber. He bent downwards and gripped either side of the strip. He tried to stand up with it, but he couldn't lift it. Both ends came up, but the middle held fast to the road like it was glued there. With a huff, he had tried again. What in the world? He asked on the third try. Grunting hard, he scoffed. Holy crap, what did you hit? I have no idea, Rebecca said, hugging her chest. I didn't see anything. 1 second the tire was there, and then the next, it wasn't. She hesitated on the last word as Phil tried for a fourth time, because she saw something under the rubber. She only got a peek, but she could see it was red. Hold on, she said. It looks like it's stuck on something. Stuck? What do you mean stuck? On what, superglue? He chuckled. Rebecca looked either way, checking for traffic. With the coast still clear, she urged Mr. Sanders to try again. When he did so, she saw the red mass again. It looked like a giant piece of bubblegum at first. She was dumbfounded, and she got on her knees. It's stuck on something gooey. Gooey, you say? Phil put the rubber back down and got on his knees with Rebecca. He shined his phone's flashlight under the rubber. There was certainly a gooey mass stuck to the tyre, and it was wet and rank. The wind carried its stench right to Rebecca's nose, and the vomit she'd been holding down almost came. The smell was thick and hot. It was the smell of rot. Looks like you hit a raccoon or something, Phil said, backing away. Goddamn fresh one too. That's weird though with the tyre. I don't know why it stuck to him. Never seen anything like it before. I haven't either, she said, her right hand clasped over her mouth. I didn't see any fur on it. It just looked like meat. Yeah, if you hit them hard enough, that's what they'll look like. I'm gonna go ahead and call the state boys room real fast. We're gonna need somebody a little younger than both of us to take care of this mess, if you know what I mean. With a smile, he escorted her back to her car. He continued talking as he dialed his phone. I also think we should get some EMTs out here to check on you. No thank you, I'm fine, she said, grinning to assure him. She didn't want the hassle. I think the state boys will want it too. Might as well just ask now and get everyone here at once, he said, trying to coax her. Maybe, but I'm telling you, I'm fine, just a bit dizzy. You want to make the call? He offered. I'll let you decide. I don't want to speak for you, one way or another. He smiled and handed her the phone, which she took hesitantly. Thank you, she said as she took the phone. It's no problem. Now let's see what we can do about that tire first. I think I may have a jack in my... His question was cut by a loud thud that came from her car. On her now dented hood sat a large bulbous mass the size of a college textbook. Whatever it was held the same consistency as the thing she had hit with her tire. Given a clear look at it, it looked as though it had been chewed up and spat out. Rebecca looked up and saw nothing but clouds. She didn't know what she expected to see, but she had hoped for some clue. The thing didn't just fall out of the sky. It couldn't have. What in God's name? Phil asked, moving towards it. He could only get so close before he had to pull his undershirt up over his nose. Was that there before? Rebecca asked, trying to rationalize the blob's presence. I don't think so. I think it just fell into your car. But where did it come from? God, it reeks. Step by step, Rebecca brought herself closer to the appalling mass. Her stomach churned faster than the angry clouds above. Wherever it was, wherever it used to be, there was no evidence of it now. It resembled nothing natural that she could think of. It was just a figureless blob. A red stream of liquid ran off it, slowly dripping down the hood of her car. She pushed the notion that it could be blood from her head. Blood from what? That wasn't meat, was it? The only part that wasn't blood red stuck out of the top like a spine. It was small, white, and whereas the rest of the mass seemed soft to the touch, this part was obviously solid. When she got closer, Rebecca saw that it split into two white prongs. Rebecca took a step back when her mind gave her the protrusion a name. Is that a tooth? She asked. Even though she was confident in her assessment, she didn't know what the blob was, but the protrusion was very obviously the root of a tooth, possibly a human tooth. Phil didn't have a chance to answer before Rebecca finally let loose her stomach on the black asphalt. She proceeded to collapse beside it, her head spinning and pounding. It can't be, Phil said, his voice shockingly less playful than it had been. That's not... There was another thud. This time, however, it came from the fields. It was accompanied by a sickening crunch. Rebecca didn't want to see it, but she did. Dead stalks were flung into the air above it. Then, before the stalks settled, another blob dropped beside it amongst a hunk of corn. Pieces of corn stalks stuck to the sides and held fast. The mass rolled and jiggled, recovering from the force of the impact. More followed. Another piece fell, behind them this time. It struck nearly 200 yards from the road. Before that one had even settled, another one hit the road behind Phil's truck. Rebecca had watched that piece fall straight down from the sky. Another piece reached the row of barren trees beyond the fields on her left. The weight of the blob snapped the higher branches. She couldn't see where it landed, if it had landed at all. One struck the top of a silo, causing it to ring loudly, the sound echoing inside the structure. The piece stayed there, holding to the top of the silo's dome with ease. It had stuck like glue. Rebecca looked up to the sky. Overhead, as the clouds swirled and fought, the blobs fell from somewhere beyond them. They started as black ink drops against the grey skyline, but as they plummeted, they took on colour and grew into the disgusting blobs that now littered the landscape. All around them, the drops came faster and faster. The horror of it all struck Rebecca as a piece fell not 1 yard from her hand. A warm red liquid splattered across her face. The sky was raining flesh. "Get up," Phil said, also looking to the sky, with caution and disgust. He turned back to Rebecca. "Miss Madison, please, get up now. You need to get in your car before..." As if out of pure cosmic irony, a large chunk of flesh, almost the size of a pillow, struck Mr. Sanders on his right shoulder. The impact yanked him towards the ground, but he took the hit. He miraculously managed to stay on his feet. That didn't stop him from screaming. "Oh my God!" Rebecca exclaimed, quickly getting to her feet and rushing over to his side. The thing was still stuck to his arm. The unholy thing had moulded itself around his shoulder and arm. It formed a grotesque cast, pinning his arm to his side. Extensions from the impact had splattered out to stick to his face and chest. He wheezed in pain. "I think it broke my damn shoulder. Oh, get it off! Please, just get it off!" he begged her. "Yeah, hold on," Rebecca said, watching the sky. With every second, the rain of flesh fell faster, heavier. With every second she'd felt increasingly uncomfortable, increasingly terrified that the next one would strike her atop her head. She pictured it wrapping around her face and smothering her in rotten darkness. She turned her attention to the injured old man. Putting Mr. Sanders' phone into her pocket, she reached slowly into the disgusting mass like a leech on his shoulder. She forced her gloved hand onto the thing. She gripped it tight, and as she did so, her fingers slowly started to sink inwards. She winced as an unwelcome warmth soaked into her gloves. Mr. Sanders brought his other hand up to help. It sunk in deep. She took a deep breath, inhaling an unfortunate amount of stench, and gave it a good pull. She managed to yank Mr. Sanders forward, but the mass did not budge. It was stuck to him, like glue. With another tug, she realized her hands were stuck there too. "Harder," Phil pleaded through the pain. "Pull it harder." "My hands," Rebecca said, panicked. "My hands are stuck." Just once she tried to wiggle her fingers free, but they were stuck inside the blob. She tried again, downwards this time. She pulled with all she had, but all she did was pull Mr. Sanders off his feet. He struck the asphalt hard, and she nearly came with him. They'd accomplished nothing. Mr. Sanders grimaced, and tears started to flow down his face as she pulled him back up. Rebecca saw that it wasn't working, and set about trying to free herself. She didn't want to, but her survival instincts were in full gear. They couldn't waste another second outside. She struggled, twisted and pulled, but the revolting thing was held faster than anything she'd ever seen. She tried pulling with her left hand, and she pushed with her right. Her left glove gave, and part of her hand came free. She realized that she could pull her hands out the glove. "Please try again," Mr. Sanders asked in a pitiful voice. He could barely keep his eyes open. His shoulder was dislocated at the very least, and she knew it. There was nothing she could do alone to pull that mass from his arm. All that mattered for them now both was that they find cover. Quickly, she fought against the gloves to free her hands. The pounding of the reins grew faster and heavier. Another piece hit her car, right on top of the cab. 3 struck Mr. Sanders' truck. All of them were far too close for comfort. Mr. Sanders didn't realize what Rebecca was doing until it was too late. "No," he shook his head. "No, don't, please, try again, please. It stings, it stings!" She ripped her hands free of the gloves, and with a grunt, just a chunk smashed against her windshield. It was the size of a car tire. "I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do right now. We need to get to cover. Get back to your truck, stay there until this is over." She didn't hesitate to turn around and open her door, but Mr. Sanders could only stumble backwards. With a limp, he started to pull himself towards his truck. Groaning, he watched the sky through his watery eyes. Scared, Rebecca slammed the door shut just as another pounding thud came from the roof. She yelped, and she fumbled for her keys. They were in her pocket. That was good. But she felt for something else. A phone. Mr. Sanders' phone. She pulled it out and looked at her rearview mirror. Outside, everything was consumed by a downpour of flesh, and there was Mr. Sanders limping through. It was by grace of God that Mr. Sanders got as far as he did. He almost managed to reach the door of his truck. He could have touched it. A smaller drop of flesh, the size of a book, hit his left foot and glued it to the spot. Rebecca could only watch as he stumbled and fell hard to the ground. On his front, he could only lie there in the mercy of the sky above. Rebecca tried to see him out of her rear window, but so many drops had accumulated there, it was impossible. She could only watch the terrible scene unfold in her side mirror. He looked hopeless. The pounding of the rain drowned out any sound, but she saw his head moving. He was yelling for help. A large chunk of flesh struck his back, breaking it. Another pinned his leg. All the while, Rebecca never moved. She was safe, and her fear kept her rooted in that seat. Had a glob not swallowed a mirror first, she would have witnessed another drop strike him on the back of his head, delivering his face quickly into the asphalt below. It was an accidental mercy. She started to hyperventilate. She had no idea what to do. The rain outside just kept coming and coming. In reality, the rain only lasted a few minutes, but it seemed so much longer. It seemed like it stretched on for hours on end. For that seeming stretch of forever, all Rebecca could do was scream. She moved to the back seat away from her cracking windshield and brought her legs close into her chest. She hugged herself as the heavy rain fell over her, consumed her. Soon, the drops would cover every inch of her car and the windows. They ate the light. She was left alone in darkness.